You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 74. This podcast is dedicated to CIRCUS. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey, friends, fans, and enemies. I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. I want to start out this episode today, as I start out every episode, by saying a big thank you to all of my Patreons. You guys have been so incredible, especially in the last few months. If you don't know, Patreon is a website that people go on and they subscribe to give small amounts of money for my podcast. It's as little as $1. And every dollar goes towards my production of this podcast. And it's been really incredible lately as a circus artist, teacher, performer. I've lost a lot of work, but because of my Patreons, I can keep going with the podcast. I can keep paying my editors, keep paying Hannah, my amazing assistant, keep all the equipment and the billing up to date. So it's been really awesome to know that you guys are helping create this thing that hopefully is helping you guys out. If you're just tuning in because you're a juggling fan and my guest today, Thom Wall, he's a juggler, and you're interested in hearing more jugglers on this podcast, I recommend, in order from the first appearance to last, Marvin Ong was on episode 18, Wes Peden is episode 32, Kate Great is 37, Freya Wild is 50, Gina Schwartzman-Christiani is 65, and Eric Bates is episode 70. My guest today is Thom Wall. Thom is known for his avant-garde performance style, cultivated through training at the New England Center for Circus Arts, which sometimes during this interview he calls NECA, which is the acronym for New England Center for Circus Arts. In 2009, he competed in the World Juggling Federation's Winter Blitz event. No judge had ever seen any of his creative five-ball tricks performed before, so his routine was deemed unscorable. And his work with mouth, stick, and balance have given him a notoriety in the circus world. In 2013, he became the first person ever to juggle 6 knives, and to date, he's the only person to accomplish this feat. He was hired by Cirque du Soleil in 2014 in their touring show Totem. Thom's mouth stick act was inducted into the Museum of Historical Juggling Props in Middleton, Ohio. The museum curator, David Kane, reflected on the introduction of this gentleman juggler's prop by saying, quote, "Thom is one of the brightest stars in the juggling world. He has a wide array of skills, but what he is known for, few people, even jugglers, can do." In 2019, he published his first book, Juggling from Antiquity to the Middle Ages. It reached number 1 on the Amazon charts for theater history and criticism on the day of release. 3 months after the book's release, its e-book format was awarded Best Nonfiction Book of 2019. Thom is also an old friend of mine, and I want to say that this interview is a mess from beginning to end. There's like 2 parts where I stop the interview to put ice on my hands. Thom and I swear at each other a lot. There's this whole section that Thom told me to take out, and I just didn't. In other words, I super enjoyed making this episode, and I really hope you like listening. Thom is a wellspring of knowledge and talent and intelligence, and if I didn't know him so well, I would also say he's a pretty great guy. Here's my interview with Thom Wall. I swear to God, dude, we cannot use that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
Thomas Henry Wall, how do you make your coffee?
Black.
No, not how do you take it. Like, how do you make it? Like, are you like a
well, this is
espresso guy? What's your like? I'm getting down to brass tacks. First question off the bat.
Totally. I didn't expect this to be such a tell-all situation.
Wow.
Well, I ran out of coffee filters today. Usually I just make a gigantic pot of drip coffee in the morning and I just work on that all day. But so no, I'm making, it's just AeroPress and I threw a couple of ice cubes in there. So it's a tepid Americano.
Dude, I'm all about the AeroPress.
Yeah. No, it's the best way, the cheapest way to make good coffee for sure.
AeroPress. This whole podcast is actually sponsored by AeroPress.
No shit. That's amazing.
That's not true at all.
Oh,
that was
well.
I wish it were. AeroPress, if you're listening, the whole company.
Yeah.
Because you also have a huge fascination in circus arts.
Yeah, I mean, there are more people. Like, I used to know a guy, he's a juggling coach who used to sort of be I guess he still is, even though they've canceled all the tournaments, but a semi-professional pinball player. And he got sponsored by the barbecue shop just down the street. And so he got like a plate of ribs every day that they were doing a thing. And he wore their special, like emulsion print bicycle jersey whenever he was playing games. It was amazing.
So this dude is getting free ribs to play pinball.
Yeah, back when he was in St. Louis, he moved away. But
that's winning. I should interview him.
Yeah. I'll give you his information.
I don't know if pinball counts as a circus art.
No, it definitely doesn't. But he's like a juggler, tight wire walker coach guy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, I'm not revealing his name. I'm being cagey, but I'll connect you guys. I'm sure he'd love to talk.
Cool. Oh, I should tell you also, I listened to all of this before I send it to my editor. So if there's something that I say or you don't want to talk about, you just be like, I don't want to talk about that, Shannon. And I'll be like, all right, cool.
Cool. And then there's like after the closing credits, then there's that blooper reel of me refusing to talk about anything.
Yeah. No. I put that on my Patreon and I sell it for $300 a pop.
Oh, no, that's great. So long as I get a cut, 10%, 15%, finder's fee on all the embarrassing
300,
stuff.
that sounds great.
Yeah, I'll take it. It's more than I'm making right now.
Everybody's got a price. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about this. Who are you? What did you do before the zombie apocalypse? And what do you do now?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah, so my name is Thom Wall. I'm a juggler, variety entertainer guy. I also run a small publishing company called Modern Vaudeville Press. We've sort of been called the university press of the circus world because we do high level. Okay, that sounds really douchey to call it that way.
It already sounds douchey to call it the university level press.
No. We've been called honestly.
Who said that?
Yeah. There was an article by the International Jugglers Association that reviewed our first 3 books that we came out with.
Work. Okay.
Well, yeah. Well, no. Here's the thing. It's like a lot of texts in the circus world. This is changing sort of with this, the new circademia that's kind of popping up. But especially in the juggling world, there aren't a lot of resources that actually have an academic bent to them. You have books about juggling history, but they don't cite a single source. Yeah, when we came out with my first book, Juggling from Antiquity to the Middle Ages, that was the first juggling book that came out with a bibliography, and certainly the very first one that had a 45-page bibliography at the end of it. Yeah, so we do sort of like high-level academic works that hopefully are still interesting and engaging to the general public. This is all sounding like so fucking pretentious, Shannon.
It's not my life, it's yours, dude. I didn't choose this course.
Yeah, if you think this is tedious, imagine how I feel. Let's start over.
Wait, so, all right, yeah. How did this happen to you?
How did you get so... You've always been a little... I'm going to change it. I'm going to change what I said, Shannon.
I'm keeping all of this in.
Editors, erase.
I'm keeping all of this in. It's so
bad. Fuck you. Shannon and I go way back. We've known each other for 12 years at this point? Like, we've known each other for a long time. I don't normally curse so gratuitously when I'm employed and happy and with strangers.
But he would still curse gratuitously at me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that is immaterial to the global situation right now. Yeah, okay. So my name is Thom Wall. I am a juggler and variety entertainer. Usually, in different circumstances, I work as a fly-on guest act on cruise ships. So they fly me out to Jamaica. I get on the ship the next day. I juggle 2-hour-long solo shows, and then I go home at the next port. And sort of my hobby.
That's pretty dope.
Yeah, it's not a bad gig. I mean, it's a hard job to get, hard job to keep, but it is fun. And it was such a refreshing change after, I juggled for Cirque du Soleil on the show Totem for about 5 years. where you're so micromanaged, every single throw, every single catch, every place that you walk along on the stage. There's no room for expression. You're kind of in a factory. So going from that, doing like a tight 7, 8, 9 minutes, whatever it ended up being in that show, to basically being given carte blanche to do my own program that's an hour long in a beautiful theater. And sure, you have to do all of the admin stuff, all the tech stuff too. You have to bring the cue sheets to show the lighting, the sound people, and the stage hands and all that stuff. You really are the producer of the show as well as the person that's actually, performing on stage. But being able to...
But you only have to make those cue sheets once,
Yeah, you make them once, and then, and if you ever make
you just
changes,
hand them to a bunch of
you change,
cruise ships in
change
Jamaica.
some of the change some of the things from show to show. Like you have a lot of flexibility. That's a much more gratifying avenue for expression and entertainment and everything compared to Soleil. But had I stayed with the Soleil, I'd be just as unemployed as I am right now. Like they laid everybody off.
Yeah.
So right now I'm focusing kind of on a side project that I have, which is this little publishing company that I run. Usually when I'm on a ship, you have so much downtime, you're just stuck in your cabin, or, you don't have anything to do for a day or two at sea, before you have your shows. So I usually work on editing and writing and, sort of handling manuscripts that we've been sent. So now, my whole life, it really is the same as being on a ship with nothing to do, in that I'm stuck in a confined space and I can work on a computer or I can take a nap, and that's sort of my day.
And the internet, but I would assume the internet's a little better not on the ship. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're on the ship and you pay $30 to have 24 hours of, dial-up speed service.
So terrible.
Yeah.
It's so terrible.
Yeah. So this is a little bit.
Do you know
more
anyone
humane.
who's stuck on the ships? I've been trying to reach out to people.
Yeah.
Crazy stories.
I don't know any circus performers that are stuck on ships right now, but if you wanted to talk to some people, I could get you connected with them. Yeah. And it all varies, line by line. People talk about cruise ships as though there's this monolithic, they all have the same practices, all have the same standards. You compare the way that Carnival started responding to the whole coronavirus thing versus how Royal Caribbean responded to everything. There are a lot of really profound differences. Honestly, I think that Royal Caribbean could safely still be going on cruises right now. Is that smart? Would that be smart for them? Would anybody buy a cruise package right now? Absolutely not. But
no,
they were extremely proactive with quarantining new people on ships, the way they handled transfers, all of that stuff. They were making sure that everything was kind of aseptic, I guess. Whereas
Crazy.
Other lines, they would just transfer somebody from one ship to the other without any kind of medical checkup and that sort of thing. That's what I've heard, at least.
Yeah, sure.
I've heard that.
I just know people have been stuck, performers have been stuck on ships. People in Australia, the ships can't port. So they're just kind of floating around. The entertainment's just kind of floating around, not being able to get back to land.
Yeah, it's totally bananas. I mean, at least some of those lines, they had the, whoever was in charge of guest services or something, they were like, well, hell, everybody is stuck. All the crew is stuck underneath the ship and the whole ship is empty. Why don't we just give them all guest cabins? So some of the lines have been doing that, which is super cool. I don't know if you've ever been in a crew cabin on a cruise ship before, but it is a little shoebox. If you have a walk-in closet at your house, it's probably about that size. I mean, no, I'm totally serious. A little Murphy bed that flips on top of the desk, and that's about it. Yeah, whereas some of the crew cabin or the guest cabins rather pretty posh. Sometimes when I'm on a ship, they basically give me the nicest unsold room on a ship when I get on. And
because you're Thom Wall.
Well, because I'm a guest entertainer. They know that you've traveled for 24 hours to get to the boat, and you're supposed to perform and do a decent job that night. And getting woken up by the anchor, getting pulled up at 3 a.m, that's not conducive to a happy audience watching a good show. Yeah. So no, I mean, sometimes you get these really beautiful giant cabins. Sometimes you get a little one. I don't know.
Wait, and so can I ask you, for the sake of this podcast, how does one get the cushy Thom Wall getting flown on the cruise ship, doing the set, and then getting flown back instead of having to spend 6 months on a cruise ship?
Yeah, that's okay. So on ships, there are two different categories of entertainment, right? You have your production shows, you have your musicians. Like there's always a little band or an orchestra that's on the ship. Those are the people that sign on crew status and they're on the ship for a long time. So if you're a circus performer, you're part of a repertory cast that does 3 different production shows throughout the course of, say it's a 7-day sailing, you're going to do three different shows twice each night. So, the first show is the Motown retrospective thing where you're just a warm body on stage. Then there's probably a bigger Broadway style show that happens, and maybe you'll do 1 or 2 skills within that show. And then usually there's more of a variety circus style show, and that's where you're going to do 2 of your numbers within that larger production thing. And yeah, so like I said, like those are the positions we're on a ship from like between 6 to 9 or 10 months at a stretch. Then for a fly-on act, those are your stand-up comedians, those are your singers, your magicians. There are a bunch of different kind of tracks of sort of, just think about entertainment in the US. And those are shows that are between like 45 to an hour long, and they're totally self-contained. It is an entertainment product that you are bringing on yourself. Whereas a production show, you end up going to, like let's say you're working for Carnival, you go to their warehouse down in Southern Florida. There's a director. There are all the people that are basically telling you what it is that you're going to do. And you're just sort of you're an actor, you're a cog in a larger machine. Whereas when you're fly on, you bring a fully rendered final product and you take that onto the ship. And so the only way that you can get a fly on position is if you have an agent. A lot of times a cruise ship, actually, I think it's every single line with the exception of Princess. I think Princess still lets you self-represent. Lines have relationships with agents. The agent is the guy that is basically vouching for you that you're going to do a good job. And that's why they want that barrier of entry, because they need a gatekeeper, because there's so many people that are trying to get these jobs.
Sure.
And if it's your very first time and your show is kind of like 50-50, not so great, could be good, could be bad, never done it on a moving ship, stuff like that. If you totally crash and burn, that reflects the entire cruise line to the audience that goes there. And, cruise ships are extremely data driven. Like my entire employability is based on the audience report. You get these like little survey cards or emails or whatever after you are a paid customer on a cruise ship. And they'll ask you, like, hey, what were the good parts of your thing? What are the bad parts? Did you like the shows? Did you like this? Did you like that? And if they mention you by name, that's how you can continue getting work on these ships. And then there's also the cruise director report. Again, like none of these metrics are things that I'm ever privy to, because that can help with negotiation. And they definitely don't want you to really know. You only know if you're doing well if you keep on getting offers. Okay. Yeah, it's totally crazy. And what I understand, again, this is kind of hearsay, but I totally believe it. There's a check mark on the cruise director's report that says standing ovation, yes, no. And that's one of the largest metrics for whether or not they're going to hire you again. Wow. So, so you think about, like here we are on a podcast called The Artist Athlete. It's like how much of what I just described to you sounds like art in that contemporary or fine art sort of sense. I would argue 0%. You're a commercial entertainment product when you work in a market like that. And that's one of the...
Well, I could also argue that I've got a juggler on a show that has the word athlete in it. So
yeah, no, that's really totally fine. Yeah, I feel like I'm just going to explode.
Like you're basically, commercial juggler is pretty much... What's the opposite of synonymous? It's whatever that is.
Anonymous.
I almost said anonymous, and I was like, no, that's something different.
Hey, dude, you're talking to a juggler, anonymous.
A non-artistic juggler. So how does it feel to not be making art?
I've never made art a day in my life. Are you kidding me?
That's a really interesting sentence, because I actually consider you quite artistic.
Oh,
yeah.
It all depends on the lens that you see the work that you're doing through, and what the interests of the people that are actually writing the check, what they're looking for. Right. So,
yeah, sure.
So, yeah, when I think of like entertainment, pop entertainment, like sitcoms, like the easily digestible, maybe lowest common denominator stuff, Like that's what they're looking for on a cruise ship. They're not, you don't go to a, on a Hawaiian vacation to be emotionally challenged and, introspective about, man's role in society or whatever. You're going out there to have a nice time and to forget about your job where you're selling car insurance. And if I had, a really heartfelt, weepy juggling act, I don't think that that's something that would get hired again, I mean, honestly, like that's sure. A real thing. And so when you think about art, if you think about it in terms of like creative expression or creative outlet, working through parameters to create something interesting and new, that definition of artist, I think, absolutely applies to what it is that I'm doing. But I still have to stay focused on the commercial viability of a product.
Well, yeah, but I think that I don't know. I think the definition of art always being like a weepy, heartfelt product.
Okay, look at everything that's come out of Montreal in the past 20 years.
I prefer not to, thank you. It's forced on my throat all the time I live here.
But that's your weepy emotional stuff, right?
Yeah. But I think that there's plenty of room for joy and hope and glitter and fireworks in art.
Totally. I guess what I'm saying, though, is like on a ship, you are sort of de facto limited in the emotional palette that you're able to display. Like if you start telling a really sad story and you don't have like a very funny capper to throw on the end of it to sort of deflate that situation, I think you're going to have a hard time. So I don't know. That's my little rant. I mean, especially like within the American market, like we're so far behind in terms of viewing circus as a fine art discipline. You compare us to Canada or France or Belgium or wherever, there's a lot more leeway. There's a reason why like Gypsy Snyder left the US to move to Montreal to run the Seven Fingers. It's like, that's not a company that could really exist in the US without an audience that's used to seeing circus disciplines presented in that way. And I mean, there's a lot of history behind that too. Like that goes all the way back to the New Deal in the 1930s when the NEA was founded, and how, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey was the single, like it was bigger than Hollywood, right? It was the single largest entertainment structure that existed pretty much in the world. And when they were founding the NEA, they were like, okay, well, who needs help? Who needs help with work? Who can we give money to? We're talking about arts. We're talking about fine arts. We're talking about opera and ballet and beautiful Renaissance style still life paintings. And then they're like, okay, well, circus, that gets a lot of people in there. It's like, well, yeah, but they're making money hand over fist. Those are the last people that need help. And once those guidelines were established, that's where we are now. Like if you want to apply for federal funding in the US or even state funding that's being allocated through the NEA, if you're a circus performer, you have to apply under theater or dance. Like there is no drop-down menu for circus. And you compare that to France.
I knew that, but I had no idea that it was because of the history of circus in the US being this like entertainment machine.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then you compare that to sort of like the social relationship of, circus in the Soviet Union or post-Soviet countries, or like you look at France and when they had their huge, sort of Cirque Nouveau revival, that whole situation that happened in the mid or the late 80s. Like if you want to apply for funding as a circus performer in France, you got to choose, are you trapeze? Are you juggling? Like they've got different amounts that are allocated to different disciplines. So yeah, like in the US, since almost 100 years ago, circus has been seen just as pop entertainment. Is that changing now? Yeah, I totally think, it's slowly moving that way. You look at Circadium, the circus school here in Philadelphia, and look at the way that they're shaping the curriculum for their students. It's very theater forward. It's very collaborative based. They want people to create these small companies to go out and tour and present their work to try and educate the public. But that's a very long-term goal that they have, I think.
Yeah, sure. Again, I'm just thinking about like you said something about kind of like pop circus. And I think it's interesting how there are certain definitively American art forms that trend toward this kind of optimistic realm of expression. I'm thinking about like pop music or hip hop in its like most commodified form. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wish that circus still existed like that in America.
Yeah, no.
Or what it would look like now to have that. I'm thinking about like Universal Circus or these kind of super contemporary, but still very much circuses.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
Why do you think that hasn't been as prevalent? Is it just like a
Whoa, that's a big question. I think
hard-hitting questions here on the Artist Athlete podcast, Thom Wall?
Yeah. No,
How do you make your coffee? Relevance of circus in America today, you know?
Yeah, gosh, that's a great question. I mean, it's all like we're a commodity. That's the thing. If you run a sandwich shop, you're probably going to sell just as many ham and cheeses, if not more, than your crazy Thanksgiving dinner with the, sandwich with like the stuffing and all the weird stuff in it. Your experimental sandwiches, like sure, there's a market for that, but tried and true is a big thing. And like with Universal, I've seen them a couple of times, and it seems to me like they kind of have an audience that's baked in. Like, they've got a lot of gospel that's represented in there, like a lot of gospel music. Their closing always has some kind of Christian message inside of it, or a spiritual message. And I think a lot of people go to that because, one, it's entertaining, it's fun, it's peppy, and two, it sort of lines up with the audience's core values as well. Yeah. And I don't know.
Hold that thought. Yeah. I burned my hand really bad making sourdough today, and I've had like this ice pack on it, and it's like getting warm. So I'm just going to go grab another ice pack.
Yeah, sure. You do you.
Ever burn your hand? It fucking sucks.
Yeah, I have.
It's the worst.
Number one.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Number one worst, yeah.
I can't juggle right now because my hand.
Oh, that's not the only reason you're not juggling right now.
I'm back. I got a new ice pack.
Cool.
My hand is now somewhat number.
How did you burn your hand with sourdough?
I've gotten really into sourdough bread baking like everybody else.
Yeah. You're why I can't find baker's yeast right now. Thanks for that.
No, I'm actually not, because I haven't been using baker's yeast.
Okay. Yeah. Hell yeah. You're crushing it.
So wait. All right. So the real question here, Thom, since you are so smart and have decided that like you figured out this kind of commercial route to making an income,
dude,
as an entertainer.
Are you kidding me? I'm just some guy that's very lucky that he's gotten paid to juggle it all.
Well, okay, so this is my question, is like, you're so smart. You're clearly very practical about the way you're going about this impractical career. Mm-hmm. Why the hell did you become a juggler in the first place?
Oh, I wanted to economically marginalize myself further.
Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, my undergrad degree is in Germanic languages and literatures. And when I left college, I couldn't find nobody would even call me back from a job application, and I was qualified for the stuff. At least I like to think so. But the only way that I was able to get any kind of meaningful employment was through juggling. So I performed on the street a little bit. This is back when I lived in Boulder. I'm not much of a street performer, too much hustle. I was invited to open for a circus sideshow that was passing through town. Yeah, so like as part of that, like I performed, the guy liked it. He invited me to go on tour. So I went on tour with the sideshow for about 3 months. Yeah, and that's when I figured out that I actually enjoyed or had some aptitude in performing. And it kind of snowballed from there, Yeah, work begets work, I guess. Yeah, and then eventually I ended up at NECA in that 9-month version of the ProTrack program, back before it was a 2 or 3 year program.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I decided to enroll in grad school at the same time. I don't recommend that for anybody, circus school and grad school at the same time.
Yeah, I don't think you slept at all that year.
No, it was bad. It was pretty challenging. Yeah, and so I ended up with a master's degree in nonprofit arts administration. So like running theaters or performing arts centers, kind of emphasized PR as part of that. And, like the issues that circus performers or circus companies have, there are a lot of parallels between like running an opera theater in the US. There's this big thing where people have all these preconceived notions about what it is that you're going to go see or what, you're going to present. So people don't buy tickets. People hear the J word, they hear juggler, and they're like, okay, well, it's going to be that same jerk on a giraffe unicycle and a bowler hat, wearing a shiny vest, juggling 3 torches. I've seen it. I don't want to go see the juggler, because they don't know like how big that world is. It's like, same thing with opera, same thing with, tap dance, like hell, like everybody has a preconceived notion of what it is. So like when I'm on a ship, I even tell them, like, we're not going to use the J word at all. I'm a variety entertainer, a variety artist, a variety performer. And that is at least enigmatic enough that people seem to want to come to see the show.
Well, and it's not inaccurate. You do more than juggle. You do that crazy thing with the mouthpiece where you do all the wine glasses.
Yeah,
And you have a bunch of like kind of niche talents. Or
yeah, I mean,
talents.
they're all juggling disciplines. Like they're all manipulation, equilibristics, stuff like that. But most of my material, like a lot of it are sort of modern takes on extremely old school stuff. And a lot of that comes from research, you know, like you read these descriptions from like the 1860s of some performer that, you know, they did, or at least they were reported to have done a trick that involves X, Y, and Z. And this is sort of like the payoff. And this is what the reporter, who is not a juggler, reported to, you know, reports to have seen. You know, was it 5 balls? Was it 10 balls? Who knows? You know, there was a lot of stuff. And sort of trying to reverse engineer, like, okay, well, like, how could they have potentially done a trick that either was exactly what this guy says he saw or something very similar? You know, was there a gimmick? What kind of materials would they have to use in the props? And sort of trying.
Wait, that's so cool. So you like went back through all these reports of people doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, this sounds like he was probably having a wooden tray that he held up in his mouth and was balancing wine glasses on.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
like that.
Wooden stick.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, and so I don't know. I mean, this can turn into a much wider conversation about, you know, like what did mass production and, you know, the invention of plastics do to circus or juggling and all that stuff. We don't have to get into that. But
but like, can you give me like the TLDR version of that? Like, did plastic ruin circus? Is that what you're telling me?
I would say that it changed.
Because nothing I use as an aerialist is made out of plastic.
Yeah, no, sure.
That would not be conducive.
I think this has more to do with sort of like the variety arts in general. You know, like in the turn of the century, if you wanted juggling clubs, you know, like just a stick, a baton, a pin, whatever, that would be handmade and made out of wood. Depending on the person, you know, like if we're talking about Van Wyck or Lind, like with Lind, this guy out in Ohio who, you know, had like 13 lathes running at a time in his basement. If you wanted to buy clubs from him, you had to have a letter of recommendation from one of his other customers. Like it was a hard thing to get, and they were expensive. They were heavy.
You had to have a letter of recommendation to buy juggling clubs.
Yeah. I mean, this is way back in the day. You know, he didn't want to just give them to whoever. Lind literally lost a ton of his fingers just by making these juggling clubs by hand. Like there's some pictures where if you look at his hands, you can see like how many chunks of his hands are missing, right?
Damn, dude.
Yeah. So like, I get it. But, you know, then when we start talking about, I think the first mass produced juggling club out of plastic was one of Dave Finnegan's Jugglebug clubs. They were like really terribly balanced, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, like as in the fullness of time, you know, in the decades after that came out, like juggling clubs are all basically totally standard. If you're going to buy a club from Play in Italy or from Henry's in Germany, they are by and large the exact same product. You know, everybody has their preferences and there are, you know, subtle differences and stuff. But no, we're talking about a plastic body, plastic handle, a foam rubber knob, and a dowel either made out of wood, plastic, or aluminum running through it. And so if you want to juggle clubs, you just go to the shop, you buy the clubs, you go home. And so everybody now, like the big 3 juggling props, are balls, clubs, and rings. All of them are being mass produced. So there's no variation in the style of props that people are using. And, you know, like there's a trend going on, you know, I guess right now. And also if we look back like 5 or 6 years of people modifying props that they're buying off the rack, but people building their own apparatuses the way that, you know, juggling and variety performance, you know, when we're talking about vaudeville or music hall times, it mostly had to be done by hand, or you work with a prop builder to build a very specific prop that you're going to use. And that's going to be the one that you use. And if you need to replace it, like you either go back to that guy, you figure out how to repair it yourself. So yeah, so there's this large like homogeneity that's going on. So if my angle, I guess, as a performer that recognizes that he's working in a very commercial entertainment market, is that, you know, if I were to use the same props and do the same tricks as everybody else, people would hire me if they're looking for a juggler, but they wouldn't be hiring me because I am me, you know? And so I made an effort to find a bunch of tricks that hadn't been performed in decades or maybe centuries, figure out how to do them, work with prop builders or make the stuff myself, make the equipment myself, and figure out how to do these tricks. So my upbringing as a juggler was very similar to a lot of other people in that, I learned at, juggling festivals and the juggling community around the world. I learned with all of those guys. But when I started shifting over to, doing some of the kind of weirder stuff, basically just applying the same techniques that I learned back then to these different disciplines now.
That was very smart of you. Yeah, it seems like to really make a mark as any kind of performer, you either have to be really, really good or really, really different.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can be good and different, like that's where your career comes from. It's just a matter of finding that sweet spot, because you have to enjoy it too. If you don't enjoy the practice of practice, or if you don't enjoy throwing your head against the wall and trying to figure this stuff out, like you're not going to be sharing any kind of joy or positive emotion with an audience later on. Like, I don't know if you remember, like back when I was I don't remember if I started working on this when I was a student at NECA or if it was when I was coaching at NECA, but I started working on this really old Japanese trick. So there's this canon it's a performing arts canon that has like sort of a spiritual underpinning from Japan called Ito Daikagura. It was originally used as a way for Shinto priests to clear temples of evil spirits before big religious ceremonies.
Dope. Okay, cool.
But if you were to watch a Daikagura performance, which is now largely secular, you would look at it and say, yo, that's juggling. It's like two sticks and a ball, or, you're manipulating a little tray with a piece of string and stuff like that. The lion dance is a form of Ito Daikagura. Like there's all sort of like packaged in the same thing. But if you go up to a juggler in Japan, and this is an experience that I had, I went to a juggling club and there was a guy that spoke some English, and I was asking him, like, hey, what do you know about Ito Daikagura? I am fascinated by this. And he was like, what are you I have never heard of this thing. What are you talking about? And so one of the tricks, I do a couple of tricks that are based in that technique. One of them is you have two sticks that are the same length and then a ball. I use a soccer ball and two modified salt and pepper shakers, but effectively the mechanics of it are the exact
Wait, the salt and pepper shakers are your sticks?
Yeah, that's right. And so you balance the ball on top of one of the sticks on your chin, and then you get the other ball, or the other stick,
ball?
The other stick,
yeah, okay.
rather, and you place that on your forehead. So now you're balancing two things at the same time.
And the one on your chin has a ball on it.
Yeah. And then through a manipulation, sort of this very tender movement of your neck and your jaw, you can get the ball from the chin to move over to the stick that's on your forehead. And everything stays in a balance. And then you drop the first stick, and now the ball has been moved from one stick to the other in balance. And so like that's such a fast trick to perform. Like you're talking about maybe a solid 6 seconds of quality entertainment right there. But learning how to do that, I think it took me about 18 months to go from having no success to actually feeling a level of confidence with the trick. And then it was another year after that before I ever put that on stage. So yeah, is that a super frustrating, just absolutely maddening experience figuring all that stuff out? Yeah, absolutely. But
dude, what's wrong with you? And so you sat there for 18 months plus 2.5 years.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
For
and
6
now
seconds.
that's, then that turns into a writing problem. Okay, well, I've got these two sticks, I've got this ball. What are some things that I can do? Turn that last little move into the capper of an otherwise, pretty okay routine. So when I open my show on ships, I come out, I tell a couple of jokes, and then I think it's 2.5 minutes of material with two sticks and a ball. And then the big final thing is that balance transfer. And, that's talking about people with preconceived notions coming to go see a juggler. Like they're expecting to see stuff that they've seen before. I walk on with objects that they recognize and then do things with them that they never thought possible. So that's just a way to break whatever preconceived notions there are, as we move forwards with the whole show.
Nice.
Yeah.
You mentioned the sticks and the ball and dealing with all that as a writing problem. The art within the art of pretty much all circus is that there is in act creation or show creation or anything, a kind of narrative structure.
Sure.
And there's an art to kind of setting up a trick.
Yeah.
How did you learn that, or how do you approach that when you're creating it? Was that did you pick that up doing sideshow?
No, I actually I watched some of the videos of me performing with the sideshow couple of weeks ago, and it was the most painful thing I've ever seen in my life.
Awesome. Can you send me some of those links? So
absolutely not. Absolutely not. No,
I will have my people just do some digging.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, no, I mean, I would say that I got the most, how would we say it? Like the largest part of my education in terms of how to create and structure material is all based around lessons I took at the Celebration Barn Theater in South Paris, Maine. I don't know if you're familiar with the barn.
I don't know if I've been there. No, I have not been there.
Yeah, you've heard the name kicked around.
Yeah.
So
totally.
it's this physical performing school that was founded by a guy named Tony Montanaro. Mm-hmm. He's this super famous, super incredible mime who passed away a few years ago. But he's the guy that invented the glass wall, like the box. And after all of these people lifted that material from him and did it in a really hacky way, he spent the rest of his career apologizing for it pretty much. But no, the guy was an absolute legend and absolutely one of the most thoughtful performers. He has a book called Mime Spoken Here that if you're ever feeling bad or dejected about your career as a performer, the material that you're producing,
constantly,
just read the introduction to that book and you will, the world is all sunshine and rainbows after that. It's absolutely incredible. But the instructors that they have up there at the barn, they only really operate over the summer season with these intensive classes that are a week or 2 weeks long. The instructors that they bring in are absolutely phenomenal. Some of the best thinkers out there. And yeah, so I think for me, my views line up pretty consistently with a guy named Fritz Groba. I don't know if you're familiar with Fritz. Do you know
say that I am.
The whole Coke and Mentos thing? Coke and Mentos? It was him and his partner, this guy Stephen Voltz, that basically invented Diet Coke and Mentos, where you drop the candies and it shoots the Bellagio fountain of soda up into the air.
What?
Yeah, it was this huge thing on the internet back in 2006 or something.
Yeah. What do you mean they invented it? They discovered it.
Yeah, they discovered it, and they're the first people that turned that into a thing. And so their career largely has been based, not entirely, but they go to these maker fairs all around the world, and they have this whole thing where they've got 500 bottles of soda with these little 3D printed caps on them, and they pull strings and it drops candies in, so they shoot off in these big patterns and things. And
that's awesome.
And yeah, they're incredible. But Fritz was one of the original people for Cirque Mechanics. He was original cast of Birdhouse Factory, along with Stephen Regatz and a couple of other people. He's an amazing juggler, amazing clown. And I took a course with him at one point that was basically called Little Pieces of Shit. And it was ways that you can take just some tiny little idea and flesh that out into something that has a beginning, middle, and end, and how to slowly build that into a larger piece. And that lines up very much so with what you were saying about numbers having some kind of a narrative arc. And, so the question is what is a narrative arc? Well, it means there's a beginning, something happens, something changes, then there's an end.
Yeah.
And if you zoom out big enough, you can start dissecting, maybe a piece that isn't working so well and trying to figure out how all of those beginning, middles, and end, either on the micro or the macro scale, how they influence an audience's understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, I would say it would be more the Aristotelian, there's a exposition, there's a rising action, there's a moment of conflict, and then there's the resolution, right?
Right, totally.
And
totally.
The trick is usually the moment of conflict. Mm-hmm. This is how I conceive of it anyway. Sure. And then there's just a pretty quick resolution, which is hopefully someone claps for you.
Sure. Yeah, for me it's shifted forwards a little bit, where the trick is the resolution.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, we think about what I was just talking about with that ball balancing trick, right?
Yeah.
I would argue that the moment of conflict that we're talking about is when I've got these two things on my face, and then slowly you see the new stick marching down to replace the old stick. And then once it actually, something changes, there's our resolution. And then, if we wanted to get super literal and just extend this metaphor forever, the applause, that's some sort of a resolving, the afterglow, the whatever they call it, the resolution, the descending action. I don't.
The denouement.
The denouement, exactly.
The denouement.
Yeah. Denouement, clap for me. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. It just depends on how literal we want to get with applying that framework.
When people start to talk about act creation, usually they have been training super technically in some way, or they've been doing a bunch of artistic research. And then the question of like, how do you conceptualize of creating this or putting this into some form that then you can be like, here's the thing.
Sure.
And
yeah.
how do you order that? So it's always interesting. And I think you are quite good at that, and clearly are flown to Jamaica every week to sit by the beach and then, go on stage and do it for an hour. So
yeah. Well, okay. So I have a couple of different thoughts that relate to that. One is, you think about show business, technique is 50% of the battle. It doesn't matter if you can hold a one-arm handstand for like an hour and a half. If you can't make it interesting, you're not going to get work. Doesn't matter how good you are. It matters like how well you can apply what technical skills you have. A long time ago, there's a juggler, this guy named Rhys Thomas. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Just assume I don't know any jugglers.
Yeah, sure. No, Rhys is, he's an absolute legend. He lives out in Portland.
I'm not proud of that.
Portland, Oregon. It's all right. He does a lot of maker fairs. He does a lot of high school, middle school science shows, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And I would say that his middle school science show is one of the single best shows of any kind I have ever seen in my life.
Wait, for real?
For real. It is unbelievable. The structure, the techniques that he performs, just absolutely everything. Unbelievable. Thumbs up. I was having a drink at his place after the Portland Juggling Festival a few years ago. And I asked him, just off the cuff, whatever, like, hey, Rhys, I'm thinking about performing for a living. I bet you've got advice. Please give me one piece of advice. And he looked at me and he told me, Tom, technique is a crutch. And that was one of the biggest, like mind-blowing things. It's like, man, I've been trying to work on my, 7-ball, 7-up pirouette for ages. Now here you are telling me that technique is just like a waste of time. Like, my God. And, like, if you want to get super dogmatic about it, like, of course, that is untrue. You, as a circus performer, you do need to have, some chops, something to back it up.
Correct.
But at the same time, if you think about technique being irrelevant, because if your only reason for being on stage is technique and the fact that you're better at something than the audience, you're going to come across as a big old jerk. And if you want to make a living, you're probably not going to make a great living if you come across as a big old jerk, right? Again, I'm talking in extremely broad strokes here. But yeah, so like if you think about the technique being somewhat irrelevant, then you start focusing on everything else that has to do with the performance. It has to do with just your posture, the way that you walk on and off stage, the timing of a joke if you're doing a talking act, blocking on a stage, and like how can blocking change? How can the way that you breathe change the way that an audience perceives, who you are and what you're doing? And then later re-inject some amount of technique, you're going to end up with a much stronger product because you're focusing on that negative space that surrounds the technique.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is the other, if the 6 seconds is jumping from one stick to the other, we've got another 59 minutes and 54 seconds to fill. So
yeah, exactly.
Probably a helpful thing to focus on.
And how can you get an audience to care? Because they don't want to watch an hour of straight juggling. Nobody. I don't. I'm a juggler. Like, are you kidding me? Yeah. And then if you want to get really cynical about the whole thing, actors, monologists, right? They can get a standing ovation just using their mouth words. They didn't even necessarily write those mouth words. They're just reciting somebody else's thing. And here you are with all of these skills and techniques and all of these other crazy things. And if somebody prefers just hearing somebody talk for an hour versus somebody maybe talking and doing other skills and showing off this prowess, like, you've got more colors to use in this palette. Like, isn't that unfair? And you're not the one getting those standing ovations. You're not the ones, getting called back. You're not, you have the same job as, Justin Bieber or whoever. You're just choosing to entertain in a different way. So like, how can you use all of those extra bells and whistles, all those extra things as a strength by framing them and showcasing them in an appropriate way, so you can actually compete with somebody that, is reciting a poem or singing a song or something like that.
Do you ever do any directing?
I have in the past a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. My favorite, one of my favorite drills that people absolutely hate me for is, I call it the act without skills test. And this all goes back to the idea of technique being a crutch, right?
Right.
It's an interesting lens, so like, let's say you're doing a hand balancing act and you've got your chairs, you've got your, you got your music, you got your whatever. I would have you go into the room and I'd sit there with you, and you're just going to run your entire act with the same like emotional conviction and everything, except you're never going to do a single handstand. You're going to do all the same blocking. You're going to move the props around the same way. You're going to do it all as though you were actually in a performance, only without the tricks. And then we would decide like, okay, well, what can we change to make this an interesting thing to watch without a single handstand? You make all the changes, and then later on you reapply the technique and sort of see the ways that that negative space changes the way that the whole act feels. And it can feel really stupid. It can feel really frustrating.
That's so cool.
But it's a really great way to go through it. I actually have an article on my blog, on my website, that's all about that. If you want to check that out later.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
That's the thing podcasters say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put that in the show notes. Yeah. I have a ton of articles on my website about different ways.
Yeah. You've got a great blog.
And a lot of the stuff about juggling in there is turning into, later on this summer, I have a book that I've been working on for about 4 or 5 years about juggling technique. Basically learning to go from absolute zero to mastery of 5 balls, plus an understanding of sight swap notation, basics on how to build a trick, and basics on how to build an act. And the trick building section is a chapter. It's a guest chapter that was written by Jay Gilligan. And cool. The act creation part is...
I know who he is, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. Then the act creation part is a guest chapter by Fritz Groba, the guy that I was just talking about. And honestly, I think Fritz's chapter is worth the price of admission for the book. But that manuscript is with copy editors right now. I'm in the process of getting advanced critique or praise or whatever for the back matter. And that should be out in about 3.5 months, I think. So that's super exciting.
How did you launch a publishing company?
Got bored.
Yeah, dude. That's been fucking hella bored.
Yeah. So I started writing my antiquity book. Shannon and I are looking at each other, but you might recognize that cover. Yes. I posted about it incessantly last year. So I was working on that project when I was working for Soleil. I was pretty bored, pretty unhappy, and I just needed something to keep my brain occupied, So I started researching this project because it was a pretty big hole in the canon of juggling literature. A lot of juggling history books, they sort of start around like 1860 and then they move on, and nobody's actually done the research.
Well, there's a sentence always at the beginning that was like, juggling started with the Egyptians, and then there's like a picture.
Yeah, but even that is like kind of wrong. Like a lot of times they're using this image of 4 juggling women that was published in one of Karl-Heinz Ziethen's books in the late 80s, and he didn't do his due diligence, and he used this erroneous... Okay, so I don't know how deep you want me to get into this, but like there are not...
Dude, I got nowhere to go.
Yeah, there are not 4 juggling women in the tomb. That's the big thing. There was this expedition...
Scandalo.
Yeah, there was this expedition that went out in the 1830s to sort of chart the Beni Hassan, or the tomb complex, the funerary complex of Beni Hassan, which is, there are a lot of big important politicians from ancient Egypt that are buried there, basically. And in the tombs 15 and 17, they have all of these sort of like activities and pastimes and sports drawn, these giant murals, these giant friezes on the walls inside of the tombs. And each one of those, they have a section about these ball games that women would play. And there are 3 juggling women that are sort of sandwiched in between some contortionists and dancers and some people playing a ball game where you throw and catch a ball. And this 1830s one, the person that was transcribing, like literally drawing everything that was on the walls, and we're talking about miles of images, it's unbelievable.
Wow.
They drew everything out and they took it back to the UK, and then they were making the engraving plates to actually publish the book. The best that I can tell, and this has been backed up by a couple of people that I've spoken to that know a lot more about 19th century printmaking than I do. It seems like they accidentally drew an extra woman in the line of these 3 women, as there's towards the center of this book, or the spread that was being printed. They just drew an extra ball over the woman, so it looked like she was catching a ball, and figured no harm, no foul. Let's just move on. There was another expedition that went out about 50 years later that more faithfully copied all of these images of the, I'm specifically talking about the juggling women. I'm sure that there are other issues and discrepancies between these two reports.
Yeah, if they were just like, fuck it, we'll just add one more woman, like that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, at the same time,
there must be.
When you're talking about the sheer amount of work involved in this project, like that's a pretty small sin, especially when you think about how difficult it is to actually replicate all of this stuff, 200 years ago. But yeah, so anyhow, guy wrote a history book in the late 80s. He just sort of found, it was like, oh, well, the first one must be the most accurate one. Took that image that's been replicated. I know jugglers that have the forewoman tattooed all the way across their back. It's an extremely popular image because it's beautiful and it's interesting and whatever. But no, there are three women. So that's the thing. And
so
then we start talking
tattoos are
about,
inaccurate.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a similar thing with this image that purports to be from Mexico. It was an image from a T-shirt that Rhys Thomas drew, the guy that I was telling you about earlier, that juggler.
Okay. For
the Portland Juggling Festival. That was put online in the mid 90s or something, and it just got distributed everywhere. So people talk about the juggler from Toltec origins. But you talk to Mexican circus historians, they've never seen it. I talked to Rhys and he was like, yeah, I drew that on a napkin. And yeah, now you can buy a shower curtain with that on it. The number of jugglers I know that have that image tattooed on their bodies and stuff is pretty unbelievable. If you just Google juggler of Toltec origin.
Oh, I am.
Yeah.
He just drew that one day?
Yeah. Yeah, it was an image for the Portland Juggling Festival. And yeah, so I mean, this is what I'm talking about. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and the only way that you can really, from an academic perspective, assert what is true or what is not, you need to talk to the archaeologists, the anthropologists, the people. And like every chapter of this juggling history book that I put out last year, every chapter basically went through a peer review. I've got a section on Israel and Babylon, and I talked to a PhD from this rabbinical school that's like his area of expertise, and he actually went back and read the original like Aramaic texts that had been translated that were parts of the Leiden manuscript or whatever. That's
and did you do this in conjunction with a university? No,
it was just
I interviewed Alison Funk for the podcast a while ago, and she was kind of explaining academia to me. Mm-hmm. As someone who got her college degree and then was out, I didn't realize what it meant to publish in these journals and this it's kind of annoying paywall that you have to get through to access a lot of this information. So you're publishing university quality academic literature, sure, but you're not associated with an academic institution.
Yeah, that's right. When I finished the first version of the manuscript of this antiquity book, I did shop it around to a bunch of university presses for exactly the reason that you're talking about. I wanted to get some kind of highfalutin credibility involved. Yeah. And, there were a couple of people that were interested. They didn't know how they would market it. They thought it was too niche of a market to pursue. One of them basically wanted me to write up an entire marketing campaign and figure out, what bookshops could potentially carry this, who would be interested in this thing.
Yeah.
And I used to be the marketing and vendor coordinator for the International Jugglers Association. So I talked to all these different shops and sort of figured out what their margins were on things like this. And I wrote up this huge prospectus. And then we started talking about, the amount of an advance and what royalties I'd be looking at. And it was a pretty losing proposition. And it's totally fine. It makes sense. They're a business and they need to make sure that they're covering their risks because, these aren't print on demand places oftentimes. They're going to be ordering a crate of 10,000 books to try and move.
Yeah, I think that this is something people ask me all the time about my ebooks, why I don't publish hard copies. And I'm like, because I want to make money.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, you can absolutely still make money, but the publishing world has changed quite a bit and print on demand really is the way to go, not having that overhead, not having to hold on to that inventory. But yeah, so I was talking to these university presses. They seemed interesting. I realized that financially, it would be potentially a pretty lossy thing, and I'd be giving up a lot of my own autonomy and independence in distributing and marketing the book. And so, yeah, basically I just decided to found a press, and this would be potentially the only title that would ever come out. But when I published it, almost immediately, within 2 or 3 weeks, I started getting emails from people that had manuscripts that were, honestly, extremely high quality. And they were asking, if I would be interested in collaborating on the project or potentially publishing the thing and what that might look like. And so I was able to figure out a pretty lightweight model to help other people get their materials like into the world, into press, into print, hard copy.
Very cool. Are they circus related? Are they
100% is circus related? And I
Very
am
cool.
not afraid to say no to any potential projects that come up. This is a proof. Shannon and I are talking on video as well, so I'm showing her things. So this is a book called Pottery in Motion. It's about like the OG Happy Cooks Chinese style plate spinning, on a flexible pole.
Yeah.
There has never been a text about this discipline in any language ever published. And
wow, really?
This here is coming out in a couple of weeks. That's like the definitive how to do this act. And it's super old, plate spinning on, with an unmodified, ungimmicked plate. Yeah, so that's by a guy named Sam Veal. We've been working on this project for about a year now. That should be coming out extremely soon. We have the definitive biography of this music hall performer named Gintaro. He was this Japanese guy that performed in the UK in the kind of like late 1800s. My how-to book is coming out. Juggling from Antiquity to the Middle Ages is coming out in Spanish in a couple of months.
And I hope it works out. How's the book selling? Is everything going well?
Things are good. I mean,
if it's being translated to another language, that sounds like a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think we're kind of cultivating an audience, cultivating a readership. Is the press making money hand over fist? No. It's basically been a hobby that I've been subsidizing through, performing on ships or with some of the money that I saved when I was with Soleil. But I think that the end of 2022, this company is going to be more of a force, both in terms of like money that it's collecting and dumping into more projects and that kind of thing later on down the road. Like right now, I think I have 16 authors that are under contract for titles that are coming out in the next 2 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's super cool. It's super, super cool. Like right now it's kind of painful, sending out money to illustrators and to copy editors and stuff just because I don't have cash coming in. But, people are worth their wage, and I'm the one that started this whole idea, and we got contracts to honor. It's like we're absolutely, going to follow through with all these projects because I really do believe in the mission that we have. And that all goes back to like re-educating a public about what circus is, the breadth of variety performance, and also getting people to recognize that this is a field of study that has been underserved and definitely needs, some people to look at this critically if we're going to get other people to take it more seriously.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It actually sounds like you and I have the same mission. You're just a lot smarter about it than I am.
I don't know about that. I do not know about that.
I kind of want to ask you, like, what's going to happen with this whole coronavirus and when are you going to work again? But I don't think you know the answer to that either.
Yeah, I mean,
I just want someone to have the answer so that we can all feel better about it.
No, I mean, I've been following it pretty closely,
Have you?
Yeah, I mean, the arts, entertainment, live theater is superfluous, right? It's like one of the first things that goes in a crisis. Like we could be talking about the virus now and the recession that we're looking down the barrel of. I mean, you could talk about other recessions in the past, like those really do influence the direction of your career. And I'm sort of optimistically hoping that I will have some work on ships this coming September. I think that market is going to take a long time to recover if it ever does. Yeah. So, but I mean, right now I'm just putting all of this time into catching up with some old manuscripts and things. And, I feel like the revenue that comes in from this how-to project, I think it's not going to be huge, but it's also not going to be nothing, certainly enough to cover the expenses of putting that book together. But yeah, I mean, I'm basically calling 2020 a total write-off at this point.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens, but I'm not optimistic. I'm just trying to continue to stay busy and, make sure that I'm building something that will have lasting value, both to myself and to the circus world at large.
Well, we're at about an hour 10.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to edit much more than this, but I have.
You got more questions?
I have one more.
Okay, let's hear it.
I have one more question.
Shoot.
So the question I always ask people, because it's like what I wanted to know when I was a youngin', was what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
That's a great question. Again, it's hard-hitting questions.
I know. Yeah. This is journalist integrity at its highest. Wait, think about it. I'm going to switch out my ice pack real quick.
Okay.
So stalling for time. Yeah. Stalling for time. You don't have to, we could just cut all this out. You don't have to make noise.
Okay. So there's this book that I read long after I was at NECA and I'd been through NECA and I was sort of on my way with my career that I think would have easily shaved at least 2 years of hardship off of my life. It's a book for magicians. It's called How to Become a Professional Magician, a practical guidebook for making the transition from amateur to professional by a guy named Sean Mitchell. And I am not a magician. I do not aspire to be a magician. But this book really talks about the process of going from knowing a few tricks to actually having a full show and a career. And basically, like everybody always talks about, you should never work for free. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's true. But you also need to recognize that money isn't the only thing with value, and ways that you can leverage sort of cheap or free gigs to build a portfolio and make yourself into a professional. If that's like doing burlesque shows or bar shows or, stuff with a door split that pays almost nothing, like, well, what are some things that you can do in those settings that will actually make you appear as good as you are on the inside out into the outside world? So there's a lot of PR, a lot of marketing involved in that. But I wish that I had read that book back when I was, 16, 17, 18.
And what is it one more time? How to Become a Professional Magician?
That's the one, yeah, by a guy named Sean Mitchell. It's kind of hard to find at this point, but I think they do sell it on the Kindle store or something for like $10, but it's totally worth it. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I almost quit circus. I've almost quit circus so many times throughout my career in favor of something else. Like I was awarded a fellowship in Philadelphia to teach ESL to refugees before I went to NECA. And then when funding for that dried up, and I was basically told very unceremoniously that my position had been dissolved, it was like, okay, well, crap, what was I going to do? Like, what am I going to do? Like, I was supposed to get my master's of education through this thing, and I was going to have a job, and this was going to be my thing, because that's, it dovetailed so well with my academic background and my interest in language. But every single time I've almost given up on something like that, circus is the thing that has pulled me back to sanity, and it's sort of been a constant in my life. If that is your relationship with circus and you want to pursue it professionally, like, there's a lot of hardship involved, and you want to make sure that, you're doing the right thing. And if it has been a constant source of comfort and joy in your life, absolutely pursue it. But if you could do something else with more enthusiasm and better quality of life, not just, financial, but also like emotional or physical, like I would encourage you to figure out a way to either make your career path a hybrid of those two things, or, let circus be a hobby and continue working on other things that bring joy to you in the world, even if it's not through circus. That makes it sound like such a downer, but at the same time, I was going to say, yeah, no, but I mean, honestly, like,
no, I appreciate that though. It's really good, practical, piece of advice.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I think we're all being reminded right now, like how fragile a career in the arts or in entertainment really is in the world. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not trying to be a downer. I'm just saying that if you love it, go for it. Yeah. But it is a marathon. It is not a sprint. So
there you go. Well, Thom, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope it was good.
It was all right.
That was my interview with Thom Wall. Oh man, you guys, we went all over the place in this interview, from the structure of performers who work on cruise ships to what is art in entertainment versus art for art's sake, to how the manufacturing and creation of juggling props has changed the industry, to NEA funding neglecting circus because at the time the NEA was founded, circus was so large and such a big moneymaker, they never imagined it wouldn't always be raking in the kind of money it was. We can take away so much from what Thom said in this interview, but I think
the greatest takeaway is more about who Thom is. He is practical. He keeps his audience in mind. He thinks about the overhead of his publishing company. And at the same time, Thom is very much a dreamer and an artist, and someone who has a vision of something and then puts it into the world. From his publishing company to the tricks that he read in manuals or newspaper articles and then reverse manufactured to perform on stage. He truly is an example of someone who has the patience, the fortitude, and the intelligence to get it all done. If you want to learn more about or from Thom Wall, he has a really amazing website. Seriously, guys, I'm a little bit jealous. It's thomwall.com, and Thom is spelled Thom. He has a blog. You can look at his TED Talk. He has great interviews. He's just doing great stuff. You can also get his book, Juggling from Antiquity to the Middle Ages, and be in touch about more titles from his newest venture, a CIRCUS-dedicated publishing company. Again, that's thomwall.com. He's also on Instagram, Thom Wall Juggler. As for me, friends, fans, and enemies, you can always find me online. On Instagram, I'm at @the_artist_athlete. My website is theartistathlete.com. I'm also on Facebook, The Artist Athlete. And if you love what you're listening to, want to hear more, want to support this podcast, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and sign up to become a Patreon today. Thanks for listening. I'll talk at you next week, friends, fans, and enemies. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell, and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast. Straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So, if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and slings and rope by night. I really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus. And that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello, all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.
Hey there, artists and athletes. This is Andy Smith, owner and artistic director at Saltaire Circus School in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And I want to thank you for contributing to the Artist Athlete podcast. If you ever find yourself down in Florida, come check us out. Whether you're an artist, athlete, or someone ordinary just looking to be extraordinary, we got a place for you.